Hello, everyone, and welcome to another program, Our Artist Responds to a Moment here at the Walters. My name is Joy Davis, and I am the manager of adult and community programs here at the Walters Art Museum. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Baltimore-based artist Jerrell Gibbs. Hi, Jerrell. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And we have some slides to show you all today of your artwork. And so I wanted to start with the first question, and that is, how does living in Baltimore shape your art practice?
I would have to say Baltimore is my art practice. When I'm thinking about creating a work, I'm thinking about the conversations that I've had with like close friends and family, people in passing, um, and the photos that I use as references for my paintings. They're all of people from Baltimore. Again, whether family or friends. So about 95% of the paintings that you see are of some sort of representation of Baltimore. Um, I remember even doing like a still life of crabs, which is a signature in Baltimore, like eating crabs with Old Bay seasoning. Um, I've done paintings of like Lexington Market, going to the market with my grandmother when I was younger. Um, just adding those like aspects of Baltimore into like what I do.
And I love that. And here we see kind of a familial scene with this great use of color, which we will get into in a moment. In prepping for this program, you described kind of the power of books and how you were always reading, but you kind of found this like new power of books through a residency that you did. And I wondered if you wanted to kind of speak to that and what you have learned about the power of books.
Yeah, so the residency was actually the inaugural residency, the Mare residency, which took place last year in August in Baltimore City. It was held at Sunspot Studios, which was a space provided to us, to the residency, I'm sorry, by Takala Keaton. So shout out to him and thank you for that. But during that period, during that time, I really had an opportunity to really sit down and spend a lot of time just reading as much as I could, which is, it's not rare, but it's something that I've been consistently doing for a long time.
Right.
But that particular time, I just had a lot of, I had a really open schedule, and I was able to really dig deep into like books that I wanted to read prior to. And it just gave me like the freedom to think about things in a different way. It gave me the opportunity to try out new ideas and think of new things and just experience something from other perspectives.
And I'm curious for you, like, did you kind of like switch it into high gear and become an avid reader? And was this piece top down kind of inspired by that?
I became an avid reader. I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but to be honest, I really dived into books like when I was about 24, 25, and I just went crazy. Like my library is crazy. It's full of books. I'm reading like all the time. Like my dresser has like, and this is no exaggeration, I have like 10 books piled up, and just grab them and read them at any moment. But a lot of that does have a resonance within the painting top down. And again, it comes from this idea of really being able to create or like just take from different sectors or take from different places or take from different ideas and piecing something together to create a new. And the painting is specifically about not necessarily focused on reading, but it is a part of it, but just the idea of creating what it is that you want your reality to be, whatever that may be, like opening that bridge up in your mind and creating new possibilities, new potential, things of that nature.
And I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about a piece in our collection. This piece is by Thomas Couture. It's called Daydreams. We talked a little bit about it when we were preparing for the show. And in the curators describe this piece or talk about Couture's use of like blowing bubbles or some of the other kind of leisurely aspects of this painting, I'll just read a quote for you all here. Quote, since the 16th century, a figure blowing bubbles has served as an allegory for the vice of vanity. He frequently depicted contemporary subjects, but filled them with moral overtones. And I think the first half is really interesting because it kind of calls into how we see relaxation or interpret relaxed demeanor as a state of vanity. But then secondly, that second part of the description, I think speaks to your work. Maybe not every single piece has a moral overtone, but some of them do. Even though they could be about one thing, there's like some undercurrent within them. And I'm curious how you feel both of these pieces relate to one another for you.
Definitely the vanity aspect. I think when I think of vanity, I'm thinking about really being in tune with oneself, or at a space mentally where you're not necessarily concerned about others. And it's not like in a negative light, it's just like, sometimes you need that, you know what I mean? And I feel like both have a similarity in that space. Top down for me is, again, you searching within yourself or finding that space within yourself to create something new for yourself. It's not about anybody else. It's about you creating a new future, you creating new opportunities, you creating a new mindset, a new lifestyle for you, to better you, and I think in Thomas Couture's painting, it has that similar tone to it, like sitting there daydreaming, you're really in tune with yourself. You're not thinking about anybody else. You're thinking about what it is that is at the top of your mind at the moment. Maybe even on your way to drift off to sleep, but it's about you at that time. So
I do love that as something that's actually maybe a virtue more so than a depiction of vanity, that you are so in tune with yourself that you can kind of daydream and you aren't distracted by kind of what's happening around you. It's a really interesting perspective. And I just wanted to call to the comment section. We don't have a whole lot of questions yet, but there's just so much love in the comment section. So I just wanted to draw attention to that. And it's just quite amazing what's happening over there. So if you have a question, please feel free, and we'll put some of those up. Please feel free to comment or post your question, and we will get to those. So in our next slide, we have two images, one from the Walters collection by Jan Soens called Ronaldo and Armida in the Enchanted Garden. And we have a piece by you, Jerrell, I wish I could give you this feeling. And I'm curious, in this painting, in this Jan painting, it shows two figures in leisure, just again, speaking to leisure. And your work in particular echoes this relaxed pose and environment amongst nature, which I think is kind of key. And I'm curious, switching around a little bit, do you think that Black bodies and leisure are absent in art or in museums? And if you could give maybe a why, or maybe on a more positive note, what you hope to see in the future in like institutions or museum spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Black bodies and leisure isn't present within art. I just think it's not championed in like the institutions and the museums, unfortunately. I think it's getting better, but I mean, it could be it's a work in progress. We'll say that. But again, I don't think it's missing. I see it all the time. There are a lot of painters, there are a lot of paintings, there are a lot of artists, creators who work in the same vein and talk about this similar things. They may express it in a different way, but it's there. I think we just have to do a better job of showing that, and championing.
I agree with you. I also think that there's so many avenues into which Black artists talk about leisure, or artists of color talk about leisure, but especially Black artists talk about leisure that's a little bit different, right? In comparison, and I'm certainly, this is not my wheelhouse of study as far as the painting to the left, but that is very, for general audiences, a very common depiction of leisure,
right.
High-end society or court folks that hung out with kings and queens, and kind of how they chose to spend their free time, being that it was a luxury, and kind of how through what you were talking about actually with Daydreams, how it actually isn't just a luxury for the rich. Like we can all kind of partake in that luxury, and seeing leisure as a luxury to begin with. Just so much to unpack about that. So I appreciate your thoughts. I wanted to pull a little bit from the questions. Tiffany has a lot. Oh, Trish wanted to ask, do I paint? No, I'm not a painter. I just really love art, and I really appreciate the artists that we get to speak to in this series, and Jerrell's work especially. Tiffany asks, what is next for you?
Oh, wow. Well, currently I'm working on another painting, as I'm always working. I'm really looking forward to, this sounds so crazy, but to 2021, hopefully, so, you know, when everything opens back up. I plan on doing a lot of traveling, especially to Europe. So
you and me both.
yeah, I have a lot of things lined up, you know, just pending this whole traveling thing. So we'll see.
I want to dip back into our questions, and this is a main question about. This is another great example of leisure, and nature. Also, leisure and nature. And before I start, I talk about use of color. Maybe we can start that here. But I wanted to actually ask you if you could talk a little bit about this piece.
Yeah. So Pop Thugs Mansion. If you haven't, please go check that song out. It's one of my favorite songs by Tupac, and that's like one of my favorite artists of all time. For that painting specifically, it was like me getting into. Okay, so in order for me to talk about this, I have to like give you some insight as to like where my mind goes when I'm ready to paint. I tend to use my paintings or the process of painting as a way to escape mentally, and it's like a therapeutic like exercise for me. So when I'm painting, I'm thinking of like ways to make me feel better, you know, mentally, keeping me mentally sane, not allowing my physical to be the reality. You know what I mean? Like not being boxed in by me, but allowing my paintings and what's in my mind to explore and go and beyond. So when I made that painting, that's where I was. I was thinking about like, what would it feel like to be a Black male and just like be free? You know what I mean? And that's what I thought of. And it was kind of like after I did it, after I made the painting, I think there was a lot of like questions as to like the reason behind it and like the whole stereotype of Black people not being able to swim or not knowing how to swim. And, you know, a lot of that came up, which it is what it is. It doesn't bother me. But the reality is that we do know how to swim and, you know, but yeah, it was just like really about like freeing myself. That idea of leisure, being okay with taking time off and like enjoying yourself and having a good time. These paintings come from a period in my life where I was like constantly grinding. I was in graduate school. Like I really didn't have a break, you know, like I have a family, trying to manage a professional art career as well. So it was a lot, you know, so just creating paintings like that give me that time to really just like relax and put myself mentally in the right space.
There's a question from Roland C. Brown. Do you enjoy doing art that gives a sense of calmness? You kind of spoke to that. It gives you a sense of calmness, but like in general, is that what you hope the audience gets from a piece like this or some of your other work as well?
Absolutely. We need it. Life is about balance, you know, and too much of anything is not a good thing. So when I'm constantly fed negative, I have to like give out positive. You know, that's the only way that I know how to exist. And that's the way that I've been able to continue to grow. So I'll continue to do that. I feel like when everything is going like super smooth in my life, that's when I tend to voice my opinion on things that bother me, which is so weird. Like I'm like always against the grain, which has always been my personality, but it made me who I am. you know, so,
Right.
you know, I'm comfortable with that.
So now I would love to ask about your use of color. You use a lot of color in your work in different tones and very vivid use of color, except in this piece and maybe a couple of others. And I'm curious, if you can talk through your use of color in your work and maybe use this as a catalyst to talk about your use of different tones and less bright color in your work.
Mm-hmm. This one in particular, Mi Hermano, I was, again, thinking about that way of like mentally freeing yourself and not being trapped in the reality of what someone else like placed upon you because of what you look
Mhm.
like, where you come from, etc. And just like reinforcing the idea of you create your own experiences, you know.
Mhm.
Obviously things that happen that we can't necessarily control, but there's always a way to look at something in a different light. There's always a way to mentally get yourself out of a state, you know what I mean, or a period in your life. We all have struggles, we all go through things, but at the end of the day, I think the mind, you know, obviously the mind is like one of the strongest. It is, you know, like the strongest thing that we have, you know. So um, being able to get yourself out of those tough spots sometimes is what that painting is about.
Interesting. And so you felt that using less color kind of draws attention to that kind of thesis, if you will, of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the painting is majority like black and grays, um, and that was just like the physical reality of the individual, you know. But again, surrounded, if you look at the painting, the actual window is his head is like placed within the window, kind of, and that's where the freedom is. That's where the openness is. That's where the vegetation. That's where the life is, you know. And I really believe that.
I love it. Okay. I want to ask if you think or if you define yourself as an impressionist painter, and the follow up is why or why not. I feel like this maybe is a classroom question because we always know the why or why not. But do you think of yourself as an impressionist? And we have an example of Claude Monet's Springtime from the 19th century to
Hmm.
compare to your trees work.
I think I would, if we would put terms on it. Yeah, I guess I would, especially because of how I work and the intention behind what I do. Like impressionists during that period were interested in capturing moments. They weren't interested in like showing high society or um, creating like this perfect figure, you know what I mean, or like this
Mhm.
ideal like beauty of human. They were just like really out to capture what they saw, and they were painting like wild and rapid, you know. And it's hard to see through pictures, but if you look at my work, like it's very tactile, it's very physical, it's very active. The paint is like it's not finely done, you know. It's raw, it's organic, and it's like in its natural state, in my opinion. um so I think I really can relate to that. I think it's just a part of my character as well. um
Yeah.
and they were really interested in using color, and I love color as well. And I'm not like using color as a way to create like, I'm not using color for the sake of like a subject matter or it to have some sort of resonance and have a meaning behind it. I'm using color as a way to express what I see and to heighten the experience. So yeah, I guess I can I guess I would call myself an impressionist.
That's great. And I think it's interesting how much you lean into some of those elements that you talked about that make your work and impressionist work so similar. But again, like your use of color, I think tonally alone, just the portrayal of Black folks is an incredible addition to the canon. Is as they notoriously didn't necessarily work with darker skin tones. Some there are some examples out there, but for the most part, it was very limited.
Right.
Um, And I'm curious for you, because we've shown some portraits, some tableaus, and I'm curious for you, like, why portraits are important, not only to your art practice, but for you as a person. Like, what resonates with you about portraits?
Portraits allow, for one, I think portraits resonates with viewers a lot because they see themselves within it. And they can relate, like it's another human, that human to human interaction. It's something that we all know when we see another human, it's a human, well, hopefully. But at the same token, I think for me, um, I needed to see myself, I need to see myself in museums. I need to see people that look like me. I need to see people that have hair like me in museums, I need my daughter to see that, I need my family to see that. I need people who don't go to museums, institutions, and galleries, who just happen to stop by. I need them to see themselves. And that's what it was about. It's about representation. It's about showing us in our natural state and just being who we are and not having to be not having to be like a celebrity or not having to be famous, but just being who you are and that being enough, So I wanted to show that.
I think the idea, of not having to be a celebrity to be recognized, whether in a portrait or in any other medium, is really strong. I wanted to show another portrait that you created called Good Question, and I wanted to dive in. There were a couple of questions that were similar, asking you about your inspiration. Who inspires you? I think one person asked a more specific question of, is it artists or literary inspirations, since you mentioned reading?
Oh man, I can't get enough of either, to be honest with you. But obviously painters and artists, because we have that creative. We all have that creative. Writers and all of that. What am I saying? I love paintings, but I also love to watch like docuseries and like biographies about writers. Like when I'm watching a movie about a writer, it really gets me like excited to paint. It's weird, and I'm cool with that. But I don't know, something about like really talking with a writer or watching a movie about a writer like really gets my ideas flowing.
I love that. I have my last question. I'm going to go to some more audience questions. We are still in the midst of a pandemic, and I like to say this: we're also in the midst of a revolution. How are you using art at this time? Are you using it to cope? Are you using it just because you're an active artist and therefore create? How are you using art right now?
Both.
Yeah.
It's a way to cope. It's always been a way to cope for me. And it's just a part of my life, like it's what I do, it's what I enjoy, it's what I love. I don't want to be too like deep with it, but it's like breathing, like I really enjoy it. I wake up thinking about it. I go to sleep thinking about it. Like I've pretty much like research as much as I can, like on YouTube, you know what I mean? Like anything art related, like I'm all there for it. But again, it's also a way for me to take the time to process a lot of things that happen, being a Black male. I think about a lot, and creating art, painting is a way for me to get those things out. Some people, have therapy, therapy sessions. Some people create in other ways, writing, that's my way, like that's my way of releasing tension and stress other than working out. That's like what I need to do in order to continue to move forward, and continue to exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. And it's okay to be deep. You're an artist, but you're also a human, and it's okay for us to like go there if we need to. Tiffany has a question. How have you seen your work grow?
Oh man, it's grown tremendously. Just more than anything, I think my work has grown as it relates to like what it really is to paint, and I made a point to separate in my mind, like the difference between illustrating and painting.
Mm.
And I've learned that painting is about creating a language with paint, you know, using paint to create a language or to tell a story or to talk about something. Yeah, you may see the figure, you know, and that's pretty much the grounded point. That's the entryway for the viewer. But the way that I use paint, the way that I manipulate it, the viscosity of the paint, like all of those different factors that go into painting that are kind of like behind the scenes and not in the forefront, I've learned to really use that to my advantage and understand the importance of it and how it can transform um, just a regular painting into something that's like next level.
And I think that's quite interesting. And I wanted to pull Marcus Towns' question because I think it kind of dovetails with it. How have you stayed motivated during COVID? It is the question we asked very early on of artists, and now we realize that everyone's kind of like, you know, the answer can be varied, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's the same. So yeah, how have you been staying motivated?
Right, right. One, I have a family, you know, like this is our life, this is what I do. So I have to, you know, and again too, like I have moments when I don't paint, you know, but I'm always doing something. I'm always doing something that's going to enhance what I do, you know, whether that's reading, it may be a week or two. Like when I think once the pandemic first like hit, maybe like the second week of us not doing anything,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't paint. You know, I just needed
Mm-hmm.
some time to just relax. So I was watching TV, but I was watching movies to get like ideas for stuff that I wanted to do in the future. I was reading a lot, you know,
So you were still working.
always working. Like me, I'm serious. Like it's almost like a a problem sometimes. Like sometimes I have to, like my wife has to tell me to like just relax, you know. But I'm always thinking about um, what it is that I could do, how I can make what I do better. And what that does is gives me like different ideas. And once I have those ideas, it forces me to want to create something, you know. So again, if I'm chilling, if I'm not doing anything, I'm watching something or I'm having a conversation with somebody and I'm using that as like the inspiration or the motivation to move forward and do something new.
Wonderful. You kind of have been talking about your family, like dropping in little
Mhm.
nuggets about your family. And there's a lot of questions in here about your family and how, as a working artist, you balance family life. And so I'm curious. Number one, Phyllis Brown has a question: how do you incorporate your family in your, I'm guessing, in your painting or in your work? And we'll start there. And then if you want to ask the balance question, answer the balance question, you can.
Okay. Well, my family, close friends, they are like what I paint. You'll have a few sprinkled in here where there's no relation or I don't know the person personally. That's because not it's not them in particular, but it's like something that I saw, you know, that really like inspired me to go there. But for the most part, like I am painting conversations, I'm painting experiences, I'm painting the people that I love dear to my heart that I know that are being true to themselves. I'm painting them, you know, and I'm painting us. Um, so I guess that's one way that I would, you know, have my family involved. I also like my wife helps me out a lot. Like she does a lot of the behind the scenes stuff to keep me like in the position to do what I can do, you know, what I do. A lot of stuff falls on her shoulders, unfortunately. But that's just where we are right now, and it's a blessing, you know. My daughter is, you know, my wife is as well, and my daughter is a source of inspiration. Just creating a new lifestyle for her and showing her something different, you know, something that I didn't find out until I turned maybe like 25, you know, like this was a possibility. Like she's growing up and seeing this, you know, so her reality is completely different than what mine was at her age.
Yeah,
Um, and
that's
it's all about that exposure, you know, like my mentor, Jeffrey Kent, like he put that bug in my ear. Like he exposed me to like art, being an artist as a lifestyle, you know. And when I saw that, when I would see him like every day in the studio, his grind and his work ethic, his energy, like his excitement about being an artist, like really being an artist though, you know, like
yeah.
he encouraged me and he showed me that. So you know, like what's motivate me to continue to include my family and have them a part of this. so they can be exposed and see things differently, you know?
I think that's pretty excellent that you take a general mentorship, right, that is helpful for you, and you kind of not only take on mentees, but actually just use that sort of dynamic with your family. I think that we could all be doing that with kind of the skills that we have, and vice
Absolutely.
versa, of course. But I just think I just wanted to kind of pick that out of what you said, because I think that's quite incredible, to be able
Yeah.
to do that. Number one, to be able to have the privilege to do that, but just to do it in general.
Right.
Um, and the second question was, how do you balance family life and your art practice? It seems like it's very meshed, but I could be assuming.
It is. Some days are better than others. But I think we've gotten to the point where we've been doing it for so long. We're kind of like in a good space. We got a rhythm now. It was very challenging in the beginning. I had to, first and foremost, I had to figure out how to be a better time manager. You know, I had to learn how to maximize my time. And again, these things came late in life for me. Like I didn't figure that out until I was 25, 26, you know. So I had to like learn how to manage my time to the best of my ability. And once I learned that, I figured out, okay, I have to, you know, I have a family, so I have to spend quality time with them and not just be there, but I have to like devote time and energy to them. So like I know their schedule, I know what they like to do, I know like when they like to go to bed. So the time that we have where I'm spending it with them, that's it. And when I need time for myself, it's after they've had their time. You know what I mean? And that's me going to the studio or like painting or reading or working out or something like that. So the way that I figured out how to balance it is just be a better time manager and understand like when it's time to cut something off, that's what it is, you know?
I think that that's the harder skill, is the cutting it off. Like you said, like spending, like when you were in grad school and like figuring out how to cut yourself off, I feel like it's so much harder than planning a schedule. Even though the schedule seems harder, but in reality, to say no and to like pull back is, I think, incredibly difficult to do, especially
It
right
is.
now, right? As we, yeah, just especially right now, because a lot of
Yeah,
people, I think we're asking a lot more of one another, for a multitude of reasons. So it's hard to say no.
it really is. You have to learn no. Like, I, who told me that? I can't remember who told me that, but I had to like master the art of no. And please forgive me for forgetting who told me that. But yeah, like that's a real thing. Like you have to know how to say no. You have to understand boundaries. You have to understand like when you need time for yourself. You have to know like again when to say no. And like this isn't going to happen, you know, because I have other commitments or I just need time for myself right now, you know, like it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. I want to end with some audience questions, so feel free to continue to ask them in the comment section. My last question for you is, do artists need art school? Do you think
Absolutely.
that's a necessity?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I say that because I was self-taught until I went to graduate school. You know, like I I didn't know anything about like I learned how to put a portfolio together again from my mentor and from watching like YouTube videos and things like that. You know, I did the research on my own. Um, and I feel like I'm doing a great job. You know, like I didn't go to undergrad for art. I dropped out of college, you know what I mean? And I got into graduate school. So you don't need it, you know, but you have to
Right.
understand what you want from it. Again, like, and I know like artists personally who, whether they didn't go to undergrad, went to, got a master's degree or like vice versa, or didn't do anything at all. You know, I think about um, artist friends of mine like Abdul Ali. He's an international musician all over the world, you know. Chris Wilson, he has his master's degree, but it's not in art. You know, he's an author, he's a painter, he's an entrepreneur. He's all over the world doing stuff. Megan Lewis, you know, like she's doing amazing murals here in the city, killing the game right now. Um, Devin Allen, you know, a photographer, didn't go to school. You know, like you don't and Jeffrey Kent, like my mentor, he didn't go to undergrad. He went straight to grad school.
Yep.
Um, I mean, my cousin Carlos Seabass Fly, he was born and raised in Baltimore, moved to California, was doing big things. A producer, a photographer. I mean, he was shooting for like Snoop, like Snoop Dogg. All like these are people who just like had a vision and knew what they wanted to do. Now, me personally, I chose at a point in my career that school was good for me because I knew what I wanted from it. I knew that I wanted to use school as a tool because that's what it is. School is in the business of making money just like other businesses. That's just the reality. And you have to get your money's worth. So I chose to go to school in order to better my network and to understand how to be the best painter that I could possibly be by understanding the language and the lingo that's associated with painting in the fine art space. That's what I went to school for. I didn't need a higher education to learn how to promote myself or learn business tactics. Like I learned that on my own. I invested my own money. I invested my own time. I put my own sweat equity into it, and I learned that on my own. So my suggestion would be to figure out what it is that you really want and understand what you're going to get from school or going to a higher education space.
I think that's excellent advice. And I would agree that you don't necessarily need it, but there's sometimes people like that framework and some people hate it. So it's like,
Yeah.
Use it to your advantage.
Absolutely, you have to. I mean, because again, like it's a business, like they're in the business of making money. Like at the end of the day, that's what it's about. So you have to get your money's worth if you're going to go to school, and you have to understand that they're not going to necessarily teach you how to be a business. They're going to teach you how to be whatever it is, or they're going to teach you about the specific thing that you're interested in. So you can't like go to an institution and think, oh, just because I went there that I'm going to be this or do that. You're like, that's kind of on you, and that's the part that they don't tell you.
I would say that is the biggest shock or surprise that people have going either to higher ed, like grad school, PhD, or just in general. So just dropping a lot of life lessons into this program for sure. I wanted to switch over to our audience. Princess has a really long question, but a really important question. So bear with me while I read it. When you visit different locations to present your work, do you feel the appreciation of your artwork differs from the appreciation from your hometown, or are they the same? So I think it's like a broader away from the city. What is the interpretation or response of your work in comparison to here in Baltimore?
I think the only comparison, the comparison would be the response as it relates to like the humanness within the paintings. Like everyone can sense that, everyone sees it, everyone acknowledges it. It's a part of everyone's experience. So like a viewer in any space in any country, in any continent, they have that same interaction with it on the base level. I would say traveling outside of Baltimore and beyond, it gets more like into the specificity or the technicality of like the way that the work is created. Like a lot of collectors, I was saying like in Europe or maybe like on the West Coast, they're more privy to understanding the language of paint. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that people in Baltimore don't. I'm just saying like that's where like it starts to separate. The technical side of the painting starts to play a more significant factor as I move further away.
That's awesome. I think that was actually much more concise. And it's I think as your art practice grows and as you as your gallery representation grows, like I think that'll shift and change, of course, and especially as you hopefully, fingers crossed, in Europe 2021, you can kind of reflect on that and that response.
Right.
There's a question here. It's a little bit of a logistics question, but I want to answer it for folks that might have questions. Is this being recorded? Technically, yes, it is being recorded. It'll be up on our Facebook page in perpetuity, so you can come back to it, share it with other folks. And then also it'll be up on our YouTube page a little bit later. So it will be here for the foreseeable future for you to share and interact with and see once again.
Yes.
Christopher Clark has a question. How has social media played a role in your art career?
Oh man, social media has done me justice. It's been my source of marketing for the longest, and I'm grateful for it. It's not really free, but it's free marketing, and I've used it to my advantage. I've like met collectors, um, different gallery reps. Like I've met a lot of people who have had some sort of impact in my career on social media. So I highly encourage like using it to your full potential, and just understanding the different nuances of it and how to present yourself, how to market yourself, how to display your work professionally. Um, yeah, and just again, like using that tool, that's what it is a resource for you to use. And it's so like big right now, it's so important, like it kind of like doing yourself a disservice if you're not, using it, at its fullest potential.
I love that. I'm going to check to see if there's any other questions. Is it being recorded? Oh, yes. There's a question from Caitlin Berry about the art market. I was trying to find it because it's in a paragraph. What have you found most surprising about the art market since joining their roster?
Yeah. I would have to say that, in full transparency,
like have you seen, has it shifted your way of thinking about the art market? Because I think, if you aren't thrown in, or maybe you've done a show, or it's a student show, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you've been a part of an art fair. You have like these small little touch points in the market, and then you get represented. Maybe you have like a bigger picture. Do you feel like you do have like a bigger picture of the art market? Because a lot of artists don't see that.
Yeah, absolutely. It just changes your whole perspective as it relates to your reach. It really gets you to a point that where you understand, like as a creator, that there are a lot of people who are willing to champion what you're doing and who believe in what you do and who you are and what you represent. It really opens your eyes to the amount of support, because it's not what's like common, it's not what's shown, like a lot of people focus on the negative side of things, and they're present, like those are realities that exist in every space. But I think for me personally, I've been like really exposed to like beautiful people who are really into like doing positive things with art, and building like really solid relationships and connections, and champion myself and many others. So it really just like opened my eye to like the amount of people who are collecting, who are out there, who are in these spaces, who are like involved with galleries and museums, etc., who really genuinely care and want to do the right thing.
Well, that's amazing. And I appreciate that question, because I don't think we ever really get to like, have a lens inside. And like I said, it's like so many different touch points. We are at the end of our questions. I think we answered almost all of them. There were so many, and thank you so much, Jerrell, for your time. I want to thank our audience for being so engaging in this program. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank our digital program for making this possible, and for all this that you see that goes behind the scenes. They make that possible for us to bring this program to you. And we will see you in the next program on Tuesday. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. Goodbye for now.
Thank you all for joining. Take care.